surrounding the square, and they have not given up yet. All parts of the society, whether they are professionals or farmers, they are all together supporting each other, hoping that they will be able to cope with this sort of attack. But it is violent, it is absolutely indiscriminate, and the numbers of injured and dead people, I cannot count it yet. We need the world to give attention to what's happening here. They need to know this. They need to know that they need to intervene. Words are not enough. It's not a matter of oil and gas that you need out of our country. It is human lives and blood that is being shed. And the West is turning a blind eye. And as they intervened in Iraq and other countries, they should consider this a similar situation.
Okay, Ahmed, we're going to leave it there. Please stay safe. Thank you so much for talking to us. I know it's a very desperate situation. We were just speaking to Ahmed. He is in AlJazeera, and he's describing how people and rebels are being attacked by government forces, tanks, forces with weapons. We are looking pictures of some of the chaos that is going on there. This is, of course, the latest from Libya, and we'll be updating you with more information as we get it. Now, Libya relies heavily on imports, and food distribution is becoming a serious problem. As our correspondent Tim Friend reports, Gaddafi's forces have been accused of withholding food from rebel-held areas.
Not guns or missiles, but food. And in a protracted conflict in Libya, it could determine the outcome more crucially than any conventional weapon. Here in rebel-held AlJazeera, the baker, Agu Fakri, reveals that the use of food as a weapon by Gaddafi supporters has already begun.
Obviously, there's no stock of flour left. We had a small quantity coming from Tripoli, but it was taken back. We saw it on TV being brought as far as Sirte. We saw that the leader said the flour could come to the east, and then the flour was turned back by those highway bandits of his.
The World Food Programme is calling for urgent and safe access to Libya after a ship carrying vital food aid was unable to dock at the port city of Benghazi on the Mediterranean coast due to security concerns. The WFP has launched an emergency operation costing more than $39 million to provide much-needed food aid for Libyans inside the country and those who fled into neighbouring Tunisia and Egypt.
We were getting reports from those crossing the border into Tunisia just earlier this week about food being used as a potential weapon. We heard that some of Gaddafi's supporters were trying to deny some of the rebels food in certain areas. I mean, if they see any food trucks coming in, they may be able to stop them. And this is the last thing we want to see, of course, because food should be available to everybody.
Libya relies on food imports. A staggering 90% of all food supplies come from abroad. Many foreign workers are employed in farming and food production, but with migrants fleeing in their thousands, food supplies are suffering. But it's not only food. In 2000, more than a quarter of the population did not have access to safe drinking water. Global food prices have already reached new highs this year and could suffer the impact of further oil price spikes amid turmoil in Libya and the Middle East. Skyrocketing food prices were among the triggers for protests in Egypt and Tunisia. And once again, they're playing a central role in revolution. Tim Friend, AlJazeera.
More from Libya now. According to the UN Refugee Agency, only a few thousand migrants crossed into Tunisia over the past 48 hours. Now compare that to 10 to 15,000 in previous days. It's raised fears that pro-Gaddafi forces are stopping people from escaping the violence. Some 180,000 foreign workers have streamed across Libya's borders so far. The UN says more than 90,000 have fled to Tunisia and some 80,000 have crossed into Egypt. Another 2,500 have crossed at the Niger border. But while agencies are warning of a growing refugee crisis, thousands of workers are still stuck inside Libya. Bernard Smith reports.
Thousands of Bangladeshis are the latest in a stream of refugees to make it across the border from Libya into Tunisia. Waiting for them, a tent camp that can house up to 20,000 people. It's already full. But aid from Europe and the United States is arriving, and the process of moving these people home is picking up. Britain, France and the US are providing aircraft to help the evacuation. The UN says that the number of refugees crossing into Tunisia has actually dropped significantly because the border there is now manned by heavily armed pro-Gaddafi forces. So almost all of Libya's neighbours could end up dealing with fleeing workers. Some have now fled through Algeria, further down Libya's western frontier. And up to 100,000 people may try to cross into Niger in the coming months. That's according to the UN. At Egypt's frontier with Libya, hundreds of African refugees are stranded in a border no man's land. Some have been there for days. Here, the Egyptian authorities have tightened security, fearing that mercenaries hired by Gaddafi may try to flee to Egypt. Bernard Smith, AlJazeera.
And before we go, a reminder for our breaking news from Libya. Pro-Gaddafi forces have launched a fresh attack on the opposition-held city of AlJazeera. That's just west of the capital, Tripoli. The government says it has regained some areas after fighting on Friday, but the rebels say the area still remains under their control. We've just heard from Ahmed, who lives in AlJazeera, and this is what he told us.
What is happening now is heavy bombing on the city by tanks and heavy weapons and mortars and extremely heavy weapons, and the rebels are struggling to resist with very primitive means, and they have no mercy. They are very brutal. There is a large number of injured and a lot of people killed on the streets.
In the capital, tear gas and rubber bullets were used to break up an anti-Gaddafi protest after Friday prayers. But a rally by the president's supporters went on all afternoon. And in the eastern city of Benghazi, a dozen people were killed by an explosion at an arms dump. It's not clear what caused the blast. Anti-government fighters say the town of Ras Lanuf is quiet after they won control on Friday. These pictures were taken before rebels fought to take the oil port. It's halfway between Benghazi and Tripoli. Well, the latest from Libya, where rebels in the city of AlJazeera are under heavy assault by government forces. So now it's Inside Story with Sami Zaidan. Stay with us for that. You can, of course, get more news from us and all of the latest on what's happening in Libya.
His forces move on revolutionaries while the International Criminal Court moves to investigate him. Is ICC involvement an incentive for the Libyan leader to respect human rights or to fight for survival to avoid prosecution?